"Pick it up, that's all you were ever good for," Rook Thorne said after smashing their wedding photo in front of his mistress and his family. The broken frame landed at Vader Thorne's feet. Glass spread across the dining room floor like ice. Inside the torn photo, a younger Rook stood beside her outside Thornlock Manufacturing's first workshop, smiling like she was the only person who had believed in him before the banks, suppliers, and investors ever did. Back then, he had held her hand like she was his courage. Now he looked at her like she was the last stain on the life he wanted to build without her. Maren Voss, Rook's mistress and newly hired brand consultant, sat in Vader's usual seat beside him. She did not look ashamed. She looked settled. Her hand rested near Rook's glass, as if that place at the table had always belonged to her. "Now maybe she'll stop pretending she still belongs here," Maren said softly. Brissa Thorne, Rook's mother, watched from the head of the table with cold approval. Soren Thorne, Rook's younger brother and Thornlock's procurement manager, laughed under his breath. Lorne and Esther Pell, longtime family friends who had praised Rook for years, looked away. Neva Dace, the Thorne family housekeeper, froze near the kitchen door, but no one defended Vader. Everyone had seen Rook take the photo down. Everyone had watched him break it. And everyone stayed silent. Vader did not scream, she did not beg. She knelt and picked up the torn wedding photo with trembling fingers. To Rook, she looked defeated. To Maren, she looked replaced. To Brissa and Soren, she looked poor, useless, and powerless. They all believed the same lie. They believed Vader had nothing without Rook. But inside Vader's handbag, beside that broken wedding photo, was an unopened certified letter addressed to her full legal name, Vader Ivar Thorne. It had come from Ansel Reed, the estate attorney for Aldrin Ivar, her late uncle. Rook had mocked the Ivar name earlier that day, snatched the letter from her hand, and tossed it aside like family scraps, never knowing what it contained. That night, after he smashed the photo and laughed with his mistress and family, Vader opened the letter under the rain-soaked porch light. It revealed that Aldrin Ivar had died and left her controlling voting ownership of Ivermont Dominion, a private industrial holdings company valued at approximately $250 million. And worse for Rook, Ivermont Dominion was the buyer he had been calling his rescue deal, though its new controlling trustee had not yet been publicly disclosed. Rook thought he had humiliated a small wife with nowhere to go. In truth, he had exposed his cruelty in front of witnesses to the woman who now controlled whether his company survived without him. Vader did not tell him. She placed the broken wedding photo into her bag and walked into the rain. Later, she would carry that photo, the original machine lease secretly funded through her mother's Ivar Family Protection Fund, the acquisition documents, and the investigation file into the meeting Rook thought would save him. When she placed them on the boardroom table, his hand began to shake. This is the story of a woman who loved quietly, funded his beginning in secret, protected his workers, and hid her strength to protect his pride, until the man she saved mistook her silence for weakness. Dear viewers, if you have ever watched someone loyal get treated like nothing, this story is for you. Subscribe and stand with Vader as truth walks into the room. Comment, Vader stood up, if you want Rook to face what was waiting for him in that acquisition meeting. Rook smashed the photo to erase her. But Vader carried it back as proof. The alarm over Thornlock Manufacturing screamed through the dark like something wounded. Vader Thorne, 36, Rook Thorne's quiet wife, and the woman most workers knew before they knew the plant owner's moods, froze outside the locked factory gate with a paper bag of food pressed against her chest and an old payroll folder tucked under her arm. Red warning lights flashed against the wet pavement. Somewhere inside the building, a machine coughed, stalled, then screamed back to life with a sharp metal shriek. For one terrible second, Vader thought someone had been hurt. Then the side door burst open. Noel Greer, 62, Thornlock's night security guard, and one of the few employees who still treated Vader like she mattered, hurried out with his flashlight shaking in his hand. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, lowering his voice when he saw her, You shouldn't be here this late. Vader looked past him toward the dim factory windows. Was anyone on the floor? No, just Machine 9 acting up again. Noel swallowed. Mr. Thorne said not to shut it down unless it catches fire. Vader's face tightened. Then he should have fixed it before it became dangerous. Noel looked away because they both knew she was right. He unlocked the gate and let her in. He did not ask why she had come close to midnight with dinner, payroll notes, and the tired look of a woman who had stopped expecting her husband to remember what everyone else needed. Everyone at Thornlock knew Vader came when Rook forgot who kept the place breathing. She brought meals when he skipped dinner. She calmed suppliers when he dodged calls. She remembered which worker's child needed medicine, which machine made the wrong sound before failure, and which family would suffer first when payroll was delayed. Rook called it meddling. The workers called it mercy. Inside, the plant smelled of hot metal, old oil, and rain leaking through a roof that had needed repairs since spring. Half the overhead lights flickered. Yellow caution tape hung around one press. A broken safety guard leaned against the wall with a handwritten note taped to it. Temporary fix. Vader stared at those two words too long. Temporary fix had become the story of her marriage. Temporary apologies. Temporary tenderness. Temporary peace. Temporary promises from a man who remembered love only when failure frightened him. A man stepped out from behind a stack of steel panels, wiping his hands on a rag. Tavin Bell, 41, a line worker at Thornlock, and one of the employees who trusted Vader more than her husband, looked tired enough to fall asleep standing. Mrs. Thorne, he said, I didn't know you were coming. I brought food for Rook. Vader looked at his face more carefully, payroll still late. Tavin's silence answered before his words did. How many families are short this week? She asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. 6 for sure, maybe 9 by morning. Accounting said they're waiting on the acquisition people to confirm another review visit. Vader's fingers tightened around the folder. Rook told them to hold payroll because of a visit, she asked. Tavin looked toward the offices above the floor. That's what I heard. Vader did not panic. That was one of the first things people misunderstood about her. They saw a calm woman and thought she had no fire. But calm was not emptiness. Calm was what she used when other people were counting on her not to break. Who needs help first? She asked. Tavin gave a sad laugh. You always ask that like your management. Vader looked toward the dark office windows. No, I ask because somebody should. Tavin's eyes softened. You've been covering for him since the beginning. Vader looked down at the old folder under her arm. Its corners were bent from years of being carried, hidden, and reopened whenever Rook's ambition outran his responsibility. No, she said quietly, I was believing in him. The words hurt after she said them. Across the floor, near the back wall, stood the first machine Thornlock ever owned. It was older than the others, painted grey, with one dent near the base. Dust covered the control panel now, but Vader remembered the day it arrived. Rook had stood beside it, like a man seeing his future for the first time. The memory pulled her backward. 11 years earlier, Rook had come home after the bank rejected his final loan request. He was 30 then, proud and desperate, with grease still on his hands and shame all over his face. He had thrown the rejection letter onto their small kitchen table and said, It's over. Nobody bets on men like me. Vader had not answered right away. Her mother, Lenora Iver, had left her a family protection fund before she died. Lenora had said it was not for luxury. It was for the day life turned cruel and Vader needed choices. That fund was tied to old Iver family accounts, including one quietly monitored by Aldrin Iver, Lenora's older brother and Vader's distant uncle, a private industrial investor the family rarely discussed. Vader used that money for Rook. She did not hand it to him directly. She knew his pride would refuse it, then resent her for offering it. So she worked through an Iver family bridge account and told him a private investor had extended a short-term note for the first machine lease. Rook believed someone powerful had finally seen greatness in him. Vader let him believe it. She never told him the truth, because back then his pride was thin as glass, and she loved him too much to tap it and hear it crack. That was the first secret she kept for him. It would not be the last. A loud laugh snapped her back to the present. It came from the office hallway. Vader turned. Rook Thorne, 39, owner of Thornlock Manufacturing and Vader's husband of 11 years, stood behind the half-open glass door of his office. He was tall, sharp-jawed, and dressed too well for a man whose workers were waiting on wages. His tie was loose. His sleeves were rolled up. He was not alone. A woman's pale coat hung over the back of his chair. A coffee cup sat on his desk with a red lipstick mark on the rim. Vader stepped closer before she could stop herself. Through the narrow gap in the door, she saw only part of the woman, one hand resting on Rook's desk, one heel crossed behind the other, one smooth curtain of dark hair falling over her shoulder. On the desk beside her was a leather portfolio stamped in silver letters. Maren Voss, Brand Positioning Consultant. Maren Voss, 31, Rook's newly hired image consultant, had been mentioned for weeks as the woman helping him prepare for the acquisition. Vader had never met her face to face. Now Maren laughed softly and moved close enough that Rook did not step back. "Once the acquisition closes," Maren said, "you won't need to keep pretending she belongs here." Vader stopped breathing. Rook's voice came lower, colder. "After this deal, Vader becomes a memory." The paper bag in Vader's hand bent under her grip. She wanted to push the door open. She wanted to ask how long he had been turning her into a memory while she was still bringing him dinner, but she had only seen pieces: a coat, a cup, a woman too close, words cruel enough to wound, but not enough to reveal the whole shape of the betrayal. So she stepped back. Because Vader had spent years learning that Rook could twist anything she did while angry. At the gate, Noel was waiting with an envelope in his hand. "Almost forgot," he said. "Certified letter came earlier. Office mail was stacked everywhere, so I held this aside. It's addressed to you." "The daytime clerk signed for it before she left," Noel added. "When I saw your name on it, I didn't want it buried under Rook's invoices." Vader took it. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, formal. Across the front was her full legal name: Vader Iver Thorne. The return address made her chest tighten. Ansel Reed, attorney for the estate of Aldrin Iver. Aldrin, her uncle, the man whose old family account had once helped save Rook's first machine. The man she had not heard from in years. Vader slid one finger beneath the flap. Before she could open it, a voice cut through the dark behind her. "What are you doing with my mail?" Rook stood near the factory door, his face half covered by shadow. And in Vader's hand, the unopened letter suddenly felt less like paper and more like a door someone had been trying to open before it was too late. Rook crossed the wet factory yard so fast that Vader barely had time to fold her fingers around the envelope. "What are you doing with my mail?" he demanded. Vader held the letter close to her chest. "It is addressed to me." Rook stopped in front of her, his shadow cutting across the red alarm light still flashing above the side door. His eyes dropped to the name printed across the envelope. Vader Iver Thorne. His mouth twisted. "Still getting little family letters," he said. "I thought the Ivers ran out of money years ago." The words landed harder than he knew. Vader's fingers tightened around the envelope, not because she knew what it contained, but because she knew the name on it belonged to a part of her life Rook had always dismissed. The Iver name came from her mother's side. It carried old money, old silence, old pain, and one secret Rook had never been humble enough to learn. Give it back when you are done mocking it, she said. Rook snatched the envelope from her hand before she could stop him. Rook! He turned it over, saw the return address, and gave a short laugh. Attorney for the estate of Aldrin Ivor. What did some forgotten uncle leave you? A cracked clock, a box of unpaid taxes. Vader stared at him. That is not funny. No, he said. What is not funny is my wife creeping around my plant at midnight like she has authority here. Behind them, the factory groaned as Machine 9 finally powered down. The silence that followed felt too heavy. It made every cruel word sound clearer. Rook walked back inside with the envelope in his hand. Vader followed him through the side door, past Noel, past the flickering lights, past Tavin, who looked up from the work table and immediately sensed trouble. Rook slapped the envelope onto his office desk like it was trash. There, he said, your family mystery can wait. I have real problems. Vader stepped into the office doorway. The lipstick-marked cup was still on his desk. The pale coat was gone now, but the perfume remained, soft and expensive, hanging in the air like proof Rook had not bothered to hide. Who was she? Vader asked. Rook's face hardened. Don't start. I heard her. You heard a business conversation. She said, I did not belong here. Rook moved around the desk and straightened a stack of folders, as if paper could make him look innocent. Maybe because you keep acting like this plant is your living room. Vader looked through the glass wall toward the factory floor. Tavin was pretending not to listen, but his shoulders were stiff. He had heard enough. Rook opened the office door wider and called out, Tavin. Tavin came slowly, wiping grease from his hands. Tell me something, Rook said. When peril hiccups, who do you report to? Tavin glanced at Vader, then back at him. Accounting, sir. Not my wife, Rook said. Don't run to her every time something feels hard. She is not management. Tavin's jaw tightened. He knew Vader had brought grocery cards to workers when peril was late. He knew she had called suppliers when Rook ignored them. He knew she remembered names Rook forgot. But Tavin only said, understood. Vader did not defend herself. Not because Rook was right. Not because she had nothing to say. She stayed quiet because some truths were wasted on people who only wanted to win the room. Rook turned back to her. You see, this is what I mean. You insert yourself and everyone gets confused. No, Vader said softly. They come to me because I listen. That is not leadership. For a moment, Vader looked at the old framed photo on his office shelf. It showed Rook standing beside the first machine he ever leased. He had smiled that day like the world had finally opened a door for him. He still did not know who had quietly paid for the key. The memory rose before she could stop it. Years ago, he had sat at their kitchen table after the bank rejected him. His hands shook as he held the letter. He said nobody believed in him. Vader had gone to the bedroom, opened the small lockbox her late mother left behind, and stared at the account documents tied to the Ivor family. That money was supposed to protect her if life became cruel. Instead, she used it to protect his dream before it died. She told him a private industrial lender had stepped in. He cried that night. He held her and said, one day I will make sure everyone knows you stood beside me. Now he stood in front of her and acted like standing beside him had meant nothing. A sharp knock came at the office door. Before Rook answered, Marin stepped in. Marin Voss wore the pale coat Vader had seen on Rook's chair. Her dark hair was smooth, her lipstick was exact, and her smile had the practiced confidence of a woman walking into another woman's pain with permission. Rook's expression changed at once. Softer, prouder, almost relieved. Marin, he said, this is Vader. Marin gave Vader a slow look from her damp shoes to the folder under her arm. Of course, Rook speaks so highly of how loyal you are. The word loyal sounded smaller in her mouth. Vader met her eyes, And you are? Maren Voss, she said, brand positioning consultant. I know, Vader said. I saw your name on the portfolio. Maren's smile did not break. Then you know I am helping Rook prepare for the acquisition. Men under pressure need the right presence around them. Vader's voice stayed calm. And what kind of presence is that? Maren stepped closer to Rook's desk, a woman who belongs in the room before he has to explain her. The insult was quiet, but it cut clean. Rook did not correct her. That hurt more than Maren's words. His phone rang before Vader could answer. He picked it up and turned slightly away, but not far enough. Mother, he said. Brissa Thorne, 64, Rook's mother and the proud matriarch of the Thorne family, spoke loudly enough that Vader could hear pieces through the receiver. Dinner is tomorrow, Brissa said. Soren is coming. I invited Lorne and Esther too. If you are going to move on, do it before the deal makes you powerful again. Otherwise Vader will cling to whatever she thinks she deserves. Rook glanced at Vader, then looked away. Vader's chest went cold. Another male voice sounded in the background of the call. Soren Thorne, 37, Rook's younger brother and Thornlock's procurement manager, laughed loudly. Invite Maren, Soren said. Let Vader get the message without Rook wasting breath. Maren looked down, but Vader saw the small smile she tried to hide. The humiliation was not an accident waiting to happen. It was being arranged. Rook ended the call and acted like nothing had happened. Family dinner tomorrow night, he said. You will come. Vader looked at him. To watch you set expectations. His eyes narrowed to understand the future. There it was again. The future. As if she had not helped him survive the beginning. Vader picked up her payroll folder and walked toward the door. She wanted the attorney letter, but Rook lifted it from the desk first and tossed it into the trash beside him. You can dig through family ghosts later, he said. Right now, try not to embarrass me. She left before her face betrayed her. That night, when the plant grew quieter and Rook stepped out to take another call, Vader returned to his office. Her heart beat hard as she reached into the trash and pulled out the unopened envelope. Her name was wrinkled now, but it was still hers. She slid one finger under the flap. The office door opened behind her. Rook stood there, watching. Tomorrow night, he said, voice flat and cold, wear the blue dress, the one that makes you look less tired. Vader slowly lowered the unopened letter. Then he added, and do not embarrass me in front of Maren. For the first time, Vader understood that Maren was not standing near the edge of her marriage. She had already been invited inside. And the letter in Vader's hand waited like a locked door, patient and silent, while the house prepared a room full of witnesses. The room went silent the moment Vader stepped inside. Not the soft kind of silence that welcomed a guest. This silence had teeth. Vader stood in the doorway of the Thorne family dining room, wearing the blue dress Rook had ordered her to wear. Her hair was pinned back. Her face was calm, but her hand was wrapped tightly around her handbag, where the unopened attorney letter rested beside an old folded payroll note. Across the room, Rook sat at the table like a man already celebrating victory. Maren sat beside him. Not near him. Not across from him. Beside him, in the seat that had belonged to Vader for 11 years. Brissa sat at the head of the table, straight-backed and cold, as if she had arranged a trial and already chosen the sentence. Soren stood near the drink cart, pouring whiskey with a smirk he did not bother to hide. Two guests sat near the far end of the table. Lorne Pell, 58, a longtime family ally and former small investor who admired Rook's ambition, watched Vader with polite discomfort. Beside him was Esther Pell, 55, Lorne's wife and Brissa's close friend, whose tight smile made it clear she had come for the spectacle, not the dinner. Near the kitchen door stood Neva Dace, 49, the Thorne family housekeeper, who had worked in the house for 6 years and quietly respected Vader, because Vader was the only person in that family who spoke to her like she had a full name. Neva's eyes met Vader for 1 second. There was warning in them. Then Vader saw her chair. It had been moved away from Rook and placed near the sideboard, almost behind a vase of white flowers, not at the table with a wife's place, not beside her husband, near the wall where someone could sit and be forgotten. Rook lifted his glass. "You're late." Vader looked at the clock above the fireplace. "I am 5 minutes early." Marin smiled. "Maybe it only feels late because everyone else has already moved forward." The first cut came dressed as Sweetness. Vader did not answer. Her eyes moved to the fireplace. Above it hung their wedding photo. The frame was simple, dark wood with one small scratch at the corner. In the picture, Vader and Rook stood outside Thornlock's first small workshop. Rook was younger, his shoulders thinner, his smile nervous and grateful. Vader stood close to him with one hand wrapped around his arm, like she was holding him steady against the world. It was not just a wedding photo. It was proof of where they began. Vader remembered that day clearly. Rook had apologized because they could not afford a fine venue. She had told him she wanted the picture taken at the workshop because that was where their future lived. He had pressed his forehead to hers afterward and whispered, "One day, everyone will know you stood beside me." Now everyone in the room was watching him move her aside. Brissa lifted her glass. "Well, since Vader has joined us, let us toast." Rook leaned back. Marin placed one hand lightly near his wrist, not touching him fully, but close enough for the whole room to understand. Brissa smiled. "To Rook, future, and to the courage it takes to outgrow people who are only meant for the beginning." Lorne cleared his throat, but said nothing. Esther sipped her wine. Soren chuckled under his breath. Vader looked at Rook. He did not defend her. That was the betrayal before the words. Not Marin. Not Brissa. Him. Marin turned her glass slowly between her fingers. "Some women are scaffolding," she said, still smiling. "Necessary during construction, ugly once the building is finished." The insult landed in the center of the room. Neva looked down. Vader's face did not change, but something inside her stepped backward from the table. She looked at Rook and asked, "Is she your mistress?" The question was plain. No shaking. No drama. Just truth asking to be named. Rook jaw tightened. Marin's smile faded only a little. Brissa said, "Vader, don't be vulgar." Vader kept her eyes on Rook. "Answer me." Rook took his time. That was his cruelty. He wanted every second to make her smaller. Finally, he said, "Marin understands the man I'm becoming. You keep dragging me back to the man who needed help." He did not deny the affair. He did something worse. He named Marin as his future while Vader was still standing in the room as his wife. Vader's throat tightened. The man who needed help. He said it like that man had been shameful, like the early years were dirt on his shoes, like the nights she stayed awake with him over bills, the lunches she packed, the supplier calls she made, and the money she quietly moved through old Ivor accounts were weights he had survived instead of love he had received. She spoke softly, "You did need help." Rook laughed. It was not loud, but it was cruel enough to make the room lean in. "And you think you gave it?" he said. "You packed lunches and kept receipts. Don't confuse chores with building a company." For a moment, the truth rose to her tongue. The first machine lease. The Ivor family bridge fund. The night he cried because he thought an investor had saved him. The fact that the investor had been her. She could have said it. She could have opened the wound and let the room see what his pride owed her. But she looked at Marin's satisfied face, Brissa's cold eyes, Soren's waiting grin, and she understood something painful. This room did not deserve sacred truth. Rook noticed her looking at the wedding photo. His eyes followed hers to the frame above the fireplace. Something ugly moved across his face, not just anger. Shame. He stood. Still worshipping that picture, he asked. Vader's body went still. Rook. He walked to the fireplace. Don't touch that, she said. Marin rose from her chair and stood beside him, close enough that her perfume reached Vader before her words did. Brissa leaned back. Maybe it is time old symbols came down. Rook took the photo from the wall. For 1 second, he held it in both hands. His thumb rested near Vader's face in the picture. The younger version of him smiled up from behind the glass, grateful and unfinished. Vader saw the flicker in his eyes. Then Marin said, "She is using memory to keep you weak." The flicker died. Rook turned the frame toward Vader. "This picture is the lie you keep living in." Then he smashed it against the edge of the fireplace. The crack split the room. Glass burst across the floor. The frame broke at one corner. The photo slid out halfway, torn through Vader's face. No one moved. Neva covered her mouth. Marin whispered, "Now maybe she'll stop pretending." Sorin gave a low laugh. About time. Rook threw the broken frame at Vader's feet. "Pick it up," he said. "That's all you were ever good for." The words should have broken her. Instead, they emptied the room of the last version of him she had been protecting. Vader knelt slowly. Neva stepped forward, but Vader lifted one hand gently, stopping her. This was not Neva's burden. This was not any servant's mess to clean. This was the exact shape of Vader's marriage. And she would be the one to pick up what remained. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the torn photo. A piece of glass slid from the frame and caught the light. The crack ran across her younger face, but Rook's face in the picture was almost untouched. That felt honest. Rook folded his arms, still collecting scraps. Vader looked up at him. "No," she said, "I'm remembering the exact moment I stopped protecting you." For the first time all night, Rook did not answer quickly. Vader placed the broken photo into her handbag. It slid beside the unopened attorney letter. The past and the unknown touched in the dark. Then she stood, turned from the table, and walked toward the front door. Rook called after her, "You'll come back. You have nowhere else to go." Rain struck the porch hard when she stepped outside. Her breath shook once, but she did not cry. Not yet. Under the porch light, with laughter still floating from inside the house, Vader reached into her bag and pulled out the attorney envelope. The edge was wrinkled from Rook's hand. Her name was still clear. She tore it open. Inside was a formal letter. The first line made the world stop. "Mrs. Vader Ivor Thorne, your uncle Aldrin Ivor has died, and you are hereby named controlling voting trustee and primary beneficiary of Ivermont Dominion Holdings Trust." Vader stopped breathing. Behind her, the family was still laughing. But the rain had already started washing their footprints from the porch. Vader read the sentence again, but the words did not become easier to understand. Controlling voting trustee and primary beneficiary of Ivermont Dominion Holdings Trust. Rain struck the porch roof above her. Laughter still floated from inside the house, soft and ugly, like the people behind the door had not just watched her marriage break across the floor. Her blue dress clung to her arms. Her handbag hung open at her side, holding the torn wedding photo Rook had smashed and the letter that now made no sense at all. For a moment, Vader thought the rain had blurred the words. She wiped the page with her thumb. The ink stayed. Her uncle was dead. Aldrin Ivor was dead. And somehow, his attorney was telling her she had inherited control of Ivermont Dominion, a company she knew only as a distant family rumor. Behind her, Rook's voice rose through the closed door. He was laughing again. Marin laughed with him. Brissa said something Vader could not hear, and Soren answered loudly enough to make the others laugh harder. Vader folded the letter with hands that felt far away from her body. She did not go back inside. She walked down the porch steps, through the rain, and kept walking until the house disappeared behind the trees. Only then did she take out her phone with wet fingers and call a rideshare to the small hotel off the main road. By the time she reached a small hotel off the main road, her shoes were soaked and the bottom of her blue dress was dark with water. The woman at the front desk looked at her with concern, but Vader only asked for a quiet room. Inside that room, she locked the door and placed two things on the desk. The broken wedding photo. The inheritance letter. The photo was still torn through her face. A small piece of glass clung to the edge. Rook's younger face remained almost untouched, smiling from the past like he had never become the man who threw it at her feet. The letter lay beside it, clean and formal. One object was the life Rook destroyed. The other was a life Vader did not know was waiting. She sat in the chair and stared at them until the rain slowed outside the window. Only then did she cry. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying that asked anyone to come save her. Her shoulders shook once, then again, as if her body had finally found a place where it was safe to tell the truth. She cried for the young woman in the photo. She cried for the first machine. She cried for the payroll envelopes. She cried for every time Rook called her small while standing on sacrifices he did not know she had made. Near dawn, her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but the voicemail was already waiting. Mrs. Thorne, this is Ansel Reed. I am the attorney for the estate of Aldrin Iver. I am sorry for the urgency, but I need you to contact me immediately. Your uncle's trust transfer is active, and certain deadlines are now in motion. Vader played it twice. Then she called back. By mid-morning, she sat in a private office with dark wood walls, a long glass table, and no wasted decoration. Across from her sat Ansel Reed, 54, the estate attorney representing Aldrin Iver and the Ivermont Trust. He was calm, silver-haired, and careful with every word, as if he knew one wrong sentence could break a person already holding too much. Mrs. Thorne, he said gently, I am sorry for your loss. Vader looked down at her hands. I had not spoken to him in years. I know. Then why am I here? Ansel opened a thick folder. Because Aldrin Iver named you controlling beneficiary and voting trustee of Ivermont Dominion. Vader stared at him. I do not know what that means. It means your uncle left you control of his private industrial holdings company. You do not personally run every part of it yet. There is a board, an executive team, and legal trustees, but the controlling voting power now belongs to you. How large? Ansel paused, not for drama, but because he seemed to understand that the number would change the air in the room. Approximately $250 million in combined assets, acquisition capital, industrial properties, operating interests, and investment holdings. Vader did not move. For a second, the room became soundless. Then she gave a small, broken laugh. That cannot be right. It is right. I am Rook Thorne's wife. I balance old receipts. I bring food to workers. You are Vader Iver Thorne, Ansel said softly, and your uncle knew exactly who you were. He slid a sealed letter across the table. Vader looked at Aldrin's handwriting and felt a memory open. Aldrin Iver, 78 when he died, had been her mother's older brother and the founder of Ivermont Dominion. To most of the family, he was distant, wealthy, and impossible to understand. Vader remembered him from childhood as a tall man who spoke little but noticed everything. Her mother, Lenora Iver, had once said Aldrin loved factories more than people because machines were honest when they broke. Lenora had left the Iver family after a bitter dispute years before Vader married Rook. She wanted a simpler life, but before she died, She left Vader the protection fund and told her, "This is not for comfort. This is for the day life turns cruel and you need choices." Vader had used that money for Rook instead. She opened Aldrin's letter. The first line made her chest tighten. "Vader, your mother left you protection. You used it to protect a man's dream. I noticed." Her eyes moved faster. Aldrin wrote that years earlier, when Rook almost lost Thornlock before it opened, Vader used the Iver Family Protection Fund to help secure his first machine lease and an early payroll bridge. She had told Rook a private investor stepped in, but the money passed through old Iver channels and Aldrin had seen the transfer. Instead of stopping it, he watched. He watched Vader stand beside a man who wanted success but did not yet know how to carry it. He watched her correct invoice errors. He watched her remember workers' names. He watched her protect a company that never put her name on the door. The last paragraph blurred before her. "You used family wealth to build a man who later called you poor in spirit. That was his blindness, not your shame." Vader covered her mouth. Rook had mocked the Iver name. Brissa had called her useful. Marin had called her scaffolding. Soren had laughed while Rook told her to pick up broken glass. And all those years, part of the ground beneath Thornlock had come from the family they mocked. Ansel waited until she lowered the letter. "There is something else," he said. "Aldrin tried to reach you before he passed." "I never received anything. We sent notices to your legal name and to the last business contact address connected to you at Thornlock. Several were returned, ignored, or signed for by office staff who never forwarded them. The transfer became legally effective 3 days ago." Vader looked up sharply. 3 days ago. "Yes, before last night." The room tilted. So when Rook smashed their wedding photo, she had already inherited control of the company. She simply had not known it yet. Ansel continued, "That is why we must be careful. Do not tell your husband yet. Your marriage, his company. And Ivermont's pending transactions create a serious conflict issue. Everything must be handled cleanly." Vader's hand moved to her handbag, where the broken photo rested. "Why would Rook matter to Ivermont?" she asked. Ansel's eyes changed. "Not much, but enough. There is something we need to review tomorrow," he said. "It concerns one of Ivermont's pending acquisitions." "Rook knows Ivermont is the buyer," Ansel said. "What he does not know is that control of Ivermont has transferred to you. The buyer is operating through a confidential acquisition subsidiary, but the parent company is Ivermont." Vader slowly opened Aldrin's second envelope. Inside was an old copy of Thornlock Manufacturing's first machine lease. At the bottom, under funding source, was a name Rook had never known. Iver Family Bridge Fund. Vader whispered, "He built his pride on money he mocked." Ansel looked at her carefully. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, "there is more. Ivermont may now be the only thing standing between your husband's plant and total collapse." Vader looked down, the broken wedding photo in her bag. For the first time, the shattered glass looked less like an ending than a warning. Vader saw her husband's company name on the screen, and the room seemed to lose air. Thornlock Manufacturing, Distressed Asset Acquisition Candidate. The words glowed in cold white letters inside Ivermont Dominion's secure board archive. Vader stood still beside the long table, one hand resting on the back of a chair, the other holding her handbag. Inside that bag were the broken wedding photo, the old machine lease, and the letter that had turned her life upside down. For a moment, she could not speak. Ansel watched her carefully. He had warned her there was more, but no warning could prepare her for seeing Thornlock listed like a wounded animal waiting for someone to decide whether it lived. A woman at the end of the table touched a control pad, and more files opened across the screen. Thea Morrow, 46, Ivermont Dominion's board liaison and the executive responsible for organizing acquisition reviews, had a calm face and a voice that did not waste emotion. Vader finally asked, "How bad is it?" Thea looked at the numbers. "Worse than your husband has disclosed." The sentence landed like another piece of glass. More lines appeared. Delayed peril. Unpaid supplier debt. Safety violations. Machines used as collateral twice. Missing repair funds. Personal luxury charges hidden as business expenses. Consulting fees paid to Marin Voss. Procurement irregularities tied to Soren Thorn. Vader read each line slowly, as if speed could change the meaning. It could not. Rook was not just a cheating husband. He was not just cruel. He had been standing in front of workers, promising them strength, while the floor beneath them was cracking. He had been dressing like a man of power while payroll waited. He had been letting Marin sit in his office while safety repairs went unfixed. Ansel said gently, "Ivermont began looking at Thornlock months ago. Your uncle believed the plant itself had value. The workers, the machines, the contracts, the land. But the leadership was becoming dangerous." Vader looked toward him. Aldrin knew. He suspected. He ordered a preliminary review before he died. That review began before you knew anything about the trust transfer, which matters legally. Thea nodded. The acquisition cannot look like your personal retaliation. The record has to show that Thornlock was already under review because of its financial distress and operational risk. Vader looked at the screen. "And was it?" "Yes," Thea said, "before last night, before the letter reached your hands, before anyone in this room knew what Rook did at that dinner." The answer should have comforted her. It did not. It only made the betrayal feel wider. A man entered the archive carrying a slim laptop and a stack of labeled files. Calix Wren, 43, a forensic investigator hired by Ivermont to trace financial records during acquisitions, moved with the careful focus of someone who trusted documents more than people. He nodded to Vader, "Mrs. Thorne." Vader almost corrected him. Not because the name was wrong, but because it suddenly felt heavy. Thorne was the name she had carried beside Rook. Ivor was the name he mocked. And now both names were sitting in the same room, waiting to decide the future of his plant. Calix opened a file. "We cannot complete an acquisition blindly. We need due diligence, financial tracing, witness statements, and internal records. If Ivermont buys Thornlock, we need to know what liabilities are attached and whether the current leadership created avoidable risk." Vader looked down at her handbag. "I have records." Thea lifted her eyes. Vader opened the bag and removed 3 old notebooks. Their covers were worn. The corners were bent. One had a coffee stain from a morning years ago when Rook had knocked over his cup and blamed her for leaving papers on the table. "I kept these because somebody had to remember," Vader said. Calix took the first notebook and began turning pages. His expression changed before he reached the middle. "These dates match supplier complaints," he said. "They should," Vader replied. "I wrote them down when Rook stopped answering calls." Ansel leaned closer. Vader showed them lists of late payroll weeks, machine warnings, repair requests, vendor names, and small notes beside workers' names. Tavin's wife expecting. Noel's blood pressure medication. A welder named Jory needing overtime before rent was due. Dates when Rook promised repairs. Dates when repairs never came. Everyone had laughed at her receipts. Now the receipts had become a map. Calix looked at her with new respect. "Mrs. Thorne, these may help us prove a pattern, but because you are married to Rook, we have to handle them carefully. They can support the timeline, but independent records must confirm them." "Then confirm them," Vader said. Thea looked at Ansel. Ansel nodded once. That was when Vader understood the difference between revenge and power. Revenge wanted Rook to hurt. Power required the truth to stand, even if he denied it. Later that afternoon, Vader returned to Thornlock to collect personal items and observe what she could without exposing herself. Ansel had warned her not to reveal her role in Ivermont. The trust transfer was active, but the acquisition was legally sensitive. If Rook knew too soon, he might destroy records, pressure workers, or hide money. So Vader walked into the plant as the wife he thought he had broken. Rook saw her near the administrative hallway and smiled like a man who had been waiting to enjoy her defeat. "I wondered how long it would take for reality to humble you," he said. Vader looked at him but did not answer. That bothered him more than tears would have. Marin stood inside his office, surrounded by fabric samples, wall color cards, and a polished sketch of what she called the executive image refresh. She was planning new data for a company that could not pay everyone on time. Marin tilted her head. "Vader, you look exhausted. Freedom is hard on women who never prepared for it." Vader's eyes moved from the Dacre plans to the unpaid invoice tray on Rook's desk. "Preparation is funny," Vader said. "Sometimes people do it where nobody sees." Marin blinked, not understanding. Rook laughed, "Still pretending you have a plan." Vader let him laugh. He thought silence meant she had nothing. He did not know silence was the only thing standing between him and the truth. As she turned to leave, Tavin appeared near the supply corridor. He did not speak at first. He only looked toward Rook's office, then back at Vader. She followed him to a quiet corner near the old first machine. Tavin pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. "Soren told us to clean out the maintenance logs before the acquisition inspectors come back," he said. Vader's stomach tightened. "What is on this?" "Photos of broken guards, deleted complaints, a copy of the repair list he told us never existed." Tavin swallowed. "I don't know what you can do with it, but I know you care more than he does." Vader closed her hand around the drive. For a second, she saw the plant as it had been in the beginning. Small, loud, hopeful. Rook smiling beside the first machine. Her self-believing love could build something honest if she worked hard enough. Then she looked at the patched wires, the tired workers, and Marin's pale coat hanging in Rook's office. Love had not failed because it was weak. It had failed because Rook used it as cover. That night, Vader sent the flash drive to Calyx through the secure link Ansel had given her. She sat in the hotel room with the broken wedding photo on the desk and waited. The call came after midnight. Calyx's voice was controlled, but sharper than before. "We found payments to Marin," he said, "but that is not the worst part." Vader sat up. "What is?" A pause. Then Calyx said, "Your husband planned to move the acquisition payout before filing for divorce. We found draft instructions, an unsigned transfer plan, and messages discussing how to make you look unstable if you challenged him." Vader looked at the torn wedding photo. For the first time, she understood that Rook had not only broken the frame. He had been reaching for everything behind it. The evidence report hit the conference table like a sentence already written. Vader did not touch it at first. Across the top page, in Calyx's clean block letters, were the words that made the room feel colder. Planned asset movement before divorce filing. Vader stared at the line until the letters seemed to sharpen. Rook had not only planned to replace her with Marin, he had planned to take the acquisition payout, move it beyond her reach, and leave her standing in the wreckage of a marriage he had already stripped for parts. Ansel stood beside the table, silent for a moment. Calyx had his laptop open. Thea waited near the screen with the acquisition files. No one rushed Vader. That made it worse. Their quiet told her this was not a misunderstanding. It was a plan. Vader finally sat down. "Tell me what happens now," she said. Ansel opened a folder, Now we do this cleanly." The word cleanly mattered. He explained that because Veda was still legally married to Rook, every action had to be separated from anger. She could not use Ivermont Dominion like a weapon simply because Rook had betrayed her. If she wanted the acquisition to hold, if she wanted the workers protected, if she wanted Rook removed without giving him a way to claim revenge, then the law had to be followed exactly. "There will be conflict disclosures," Ansel said. "Independent review. A clean record showing Thornlock was already under acquisition review before you opened the inheritance letter. A clean record showing Rook's removal is based on operational risk, financial irregularities, and verified evidence." Veda looked at the broken wedding photo on the table. The photo was inside a paper envelope now, still torn, still carrying tiny bits of glass in one corner. She had not wanted to look at it that morning, but Ansel had asked her to bring everything connected to the dinner. So she had brought the thing Rook thought was worthless. "What if my pain is part of the evidence?" she asked. Ansel's face softened. "Then we document it, we do not dramatize it." A woman entered the room, carrying a slim legal binder. Edris Vale, 51, an independent corporate counsel hired by Ivermont Dominion to review conflicts of interest in the Thornlock acquisition, gave Veda a respectful nod before sitting across from her. Edris spoke plainly. "Mrs. Thorne, my job is not to protect your husband. It is not to protect your feelings either. My job is to protect the integrity of this acquisition. If Rook challenges it later, he must not be able to say Ivermont acted because you were angry." Veda nodded, "Then make it impossible for him to say that." They began. First came the conflict of interest disclosure. Veda signed her full name slowly, feeling the weight of both families inside it. Veda Ivor Thorne. The name Rook mocked. The name Aldrin remembered. Then came the trust control confirmation, proving she had authority to vote Ivermont's controlling shares. Then the acquisition authority documents. Then the investigation authorization. Then one more paper Ansel placed in front of her with special care. Worker Protection Directive. Veda read it twice. It ordered Ivermont's transition team to prioritize delayed wages, safety repairs, employee retention, and supplier stabilization if the acquisition closed. For the first time all morning, her voice almost broke. "Good," she said. "They should not pay for what Rook did." Thea looked at her with quiet approval. "That directive will shape the restructuring." Veda signed it. The pen moved across the page, and something inside her shifted. She had walked into the room as a betrayed wife holding broken glass. She was leaving marks on paper as the controlling force behind a company Rook did not even know belonged to her. But power did not feel like joy. It felt like responsibility. Ansel then asked about the dinner. Veda placed the broken wedding photo into a clear protective sleeve. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. "Do you want this included in the divorce file?" he asked. "Yes," Veda said, "but not as drama, as a timeline." Kalex labeled the sleeve. Date. Location. Witnesses. Lorne Pell and Esther Pell were added to the witness list as well. They had looked away during the humiliation, but looking away did not erase what they had seen. Then Neva arrived. Neva Dace, 49, the Thorne family housekeeper who had watched the dinner humiliation from the kitchen doorway, walked into the conference room with her purse clutched in both hands. She looked nervous but determined. Veda stood when she saw her. "You do not have to do this," Veda said softly. Neva shook her head. "Yes, I do." Ansel guided her through a witness statement. Neva confirmed that Marin was present at the dinner. Brissa encouraged Rook when he took the photo down. Soren laughed after the glass broke. Rook threw the frame at Veda's feet and told her to pick it up. Neva's voice trembled only once. When Mrs. Thorne knelt down, she said, she did not look angry. She looked like someone had finally shown her the door out. Vader looked away. That sentence hurt because it was true. After Neva left, Tavin joined by video from a quiet supply room at the plant. Tavin Bell, 41, the line worker who had given Vader the flash drive, confirmed that Soren ordered workers to hide maintenance logs before Ivermont inspectors returned. He also confirmed delayed wages, unsafe machine guards, and repair requests that disappeared from the system. Calix recorded his statement and linked it to the flash drive evidence. Piece by piece, Rook's world became less like power and more like proof. By late afternoon, Thea displayed the revised acquisition plan on the screen. Ivermont would acquire Thornlock's assets, not Rook's pride. The plan was direct. Acquire the valuable machines, contracts, land rights, operating assets, and workforce. Protect jobs where possible. Pay delayed wages after closing. Freeze suspicious executive payments. Remove Rook as operating head. End Soren's procurement authority. Suspend Marin's consulting agreement. Refer questionable transactions for civil recovery or legal review. Restructure Thornlock under Ivermont control. The words were calm. Their effect would be devastating. Vader read the plan in silence. Ansel asked, "Is this what you want?" She thought of the first machine lease, her mother's protection fund, Rook crying with relief when he thought a stranger believed in him. She thought of Lenora's voice from years ago, gentle but firm. Family money is not for pride, it is for rescue, but be careful who you rescue twice. Vader had rescued Rook once. He had used that rescue to build a throne, and then ordered her to sit near the wall. She looked at the worker protection line again. "If I destroy the plant," she said, "I become like him. If I save it without him, I become free." No one spoke for a moment. Then Ansel's phone buzzed. He read the message, and his expression changed. Calix's voice came through on speaker, tight and urgent. "Rook has moved tomorrow's acquisition meeting forward. He thinks he can pressure Ivermont before the audit is complete." Thea straightened. Edris closed her binder. Ansel looked at Vader. "We can delay." Vader looked at the broken wedding photo sealed in its clear sleeve. The crack still ran through her younger face. But now it looked less like damage and more like a line she had crossed. "No," she said, "then I'll attend in person." Outside the window, the evening sky darkened over the city, and somewhere across town, Rook was preparing for a meeting he still believed belonged to him. Every board member stood at once. Rook smiled before he understood why. He stood at the entrance of Ivermont Dominion's main boardroom in a dark tailored suit, his shoulders pulled back, his chin high, and Marin at his side like a prize he wanted everyone to notice. Behind him, Brissa entered with the stiff pride of a woman who expected doors to open for her son. Soren followed, trying to look confident, though his eyes kept moving toward the files stacked on the table. Rook believed this was the morning his life would rise again. He believed Ivermont was about to rescue Thornlock Manufacturing, cover the debts, forgive the delays, and let him walk out as the man who had survived collapse. He believed the acquisition would make him powerful enough to divorce Vader without fear, install Marin in the life Vader once held, and silence every worker who had doubted him. He leaned close to Marin and whispered, "After today, Vader becomes a legal detail." Marin's smile was smooth. "And I become the future." The boardroom doors opened wider. Rook took one step forward, expecting someone to greet him. But no one looked at him. Every person in the room was looking behind him. Rook turned. Vader walked in. She wore a simple dark suit, clean lines, no jewelry except small earrings. Her wedding ring was gone, her hair was pulled back, her face was calm in a way Rook had never understood. In one hand, she carried a leather folder. For a second, the room froze around her. Rook's mouth tightened. "What are you doing here?" Vader did not answer him. She walked past him. That was the first shock. Not her suit. Not the silence. The fact that she walked past him as if he was not the person who controlled whether she stayed or left. Ansel stepped forward beside the head of the table. "Mr. Thorne," he said, voice even, "Mrs. Thorne is here as the controlling voting trustee of Ivermont Dominion." Rook laughed. It came out sharp and false. "No," he said, "no, she is not." No one else laughed. Marin's face drained of color so quickly her painted smile looked strange on her mouth. Briss's fingers gripped the back of a chair. Soren looked toward the exit, then back at Calix, who stood beside a screen with a closed laptop and a stack of evidence files. Edris sat near the board chair with a legal binder open in front of her. Tavin sat at the far side of the room as worker representative, his work jacket clean but still marked with faint factory dust. When Tavin saw Vader, his eyes widened, but he did not speak. Vader sat at the head of the table. Rook stared at her like his mind could not place her there. "You expect me to believe this," he said. "This is some kind of stunt." Vader opened the leather folder. One by one, she removed the contents and placed them on the table. First, the acquisition documents. Then, the investigation summary. Then, the old Thornlock machine lease. Last, she removed the broken wedding photo, sealed in a clear protective sleeve. The room became very quiet. Rook recognized it immediately. His face changed before he could stop it. The cracked glass still crossed Vader's younger face. The torn edge still ran through the image like a wound. The frame was gone, but the picture remained. Preserved. Documented. Waiting. Rook's hand moved slightly against his side. Then it trembled. "You brought that here," he said. Vader looked at him. "You broke it in the room where you thought I had no power. I brought it into the room where truth does." Marin looked away. Briss's mouth pressed into a thin line. Soren whispered, "This is insane." "No," Ansel said, "it is documented." He opened the legal file and began laying out the facts with the calm force of a locked door. Aldrin Iver had died. Vader had inherited controlling voting power in Ivermont Dominion through a trust. The transfer became legally effective before the family dinner, though Vader discovered it only afterward because prior notices had been returned, ignored, or mishandled. The acquisition of Thornlock had already been under review before Vader learned of her role. Because of her marriage to Rook, Vader had disclosed the conflict of interest. Independent counsel had reviewed her position. The investigation into Thornlock was based on financial irregularities found during due diligence, not personal revenge. Every sentence took power from Rook. He kept shaking his head, but denial was no longer enough to protect him. Then Calix connected his laptop to the boardroom screen. The first file appeared. Consulting payments, Marin Voss. Marin straightened. Those were legitimate. Calix did not argue. He simply clicked to the next page. Payments marked as brand strategy. Payments during weeks when payroll was delayed. Payments tied to personal travel. One line item connected to a luxury purchase labeled as client hospitality. Tavin's face hardened. Vader saw it, and it hurt more than she expected. The workers had been waiting for wages while Rook had been financing his replacement life. The next file appeared. Procurement irregularities, Soren Thorne. Soren pushed back from the table, careful. Calix continued. Inflated invoices. Machine parts paid for but never installed. Vendor approvals signed by Soren. Maintenance logs deleted before inspection. Photos from Tavin's flash drive appeared beside the missing repair approvals. Brissa turned to Soren. What did you do? Soren snapped, don't start with me, Rook approved everything. Rook's eyes cut toward him. The family that had laughed together 2 nights earlier began to crack in front of witnesses. Calix moved to the next file. Delayed payroll. Unpaid suppliers. Safety complaints. Machines used as collateral twice. Emails showing Rook planned to move the acquisition payout before filing for divorce. Rook slammed his hand on the table. This is a setup. Vader did not flinch. No, she said quietly, a setup is what you arranged at dinner. This is due diligence. The words landed harder because she did not raise her voice. Rook looked at the broken photo, then at the machine lease on the table. What is that? He asked. Vader slid it toward him. The first Thornlock machine lease. I know what it is. Read the funding source. Rook looked down. His face tightened. At the bottom of the document were the words he had never known. Ivor Family Bridge Fund. He stared at them. Vader's voice softened, but not with weakness. You once thought an investor saved your dream. It was my mother's family protection fund. I let you believe someone else believed in you because I thought your pride was worth protecting. No one spoke. Marin looked at Rook with new disgust, not because he had betrayed Vader, but because his legend had become smaller in front of her. Brissa looked as if she had swallowed glass. Rook pushed the document back. You should have told me. Vader's eyes held his. You should have been the kind of man Truth felt safe with. For a moment, his arrogance broke open, and something like fear showed beneath it. Then he reached for the acquisition papers, desperate to regain control. Fine, he said, let's sign and move forward. Ansel placed one hand on the document before Rook could touch it. You misunderstand, he said. Ivermont is buying Thornlock's operating assets. It is not retaining you. Rook's face went still. Vader looked at the man who had told her to pick up the broken pieces. The plant can be saved, she said. You cannot remain in control of it. Outside the boardroom glass, the hallway lights reflected across the table like thin silver bars, and Rook finally saw that the door he had walked through as a king might not open for him the same way again. Rook's chair hit the floor with a crack that made everyone turn. For 1 second, he stood over it like he might flip the whole boardroom table. His face had gone red, but his hands were pale where they gripped the edge of the polished wood. The room he had entered like a king now watched him like a problem being measured. You can't remove me, he said. Thornlock is mine. Vader did not move. The broken wedding photo lay in its clear sleeve before her. The old machine lease sat beside it. The acquisition documents waited under Ansel's hand. Everything on the table was calm, flat, and legal. That made it worse for Rook. There was nothing he could shout at that would shout back. Thornlock's senior lender had already declared technical default, and Rook had signed a rescue term sheet giving Ivermont the right to convert the deal into a controlled asset purchase if due diligence uncovered executive misconduct. Rook had signed it thinking it would save him. Now the same paper was closing around him. Thea stood near the screen and opened the revised acquisition file. The terms have changed due to findings from due diligence, she said. Rook laughed once, but the sound had no strength. Findings, you mean her revenge? Edris looked up from her binder. The findings were reviewed independently. The conflict was disclosed. The evidence was verified. This is not a personal action, Mr. Thorne. Rook turned to the board members. You are going to let my wife steal my company in front of me. Vader finally spoke. No one is stealing Thornlock. You already spent years taking pieces from it. Thea continued before Rook could answer. Ivermont Dominion will proceed with the purchase of Thornlock Manufacturing's valuable operating assets. That includes the production floor, core machinery, land rights, active contracts, repairable supply chain, and skilled workforce. Tavin lowered his eyes for a moment, as if the word workforce meant more to him than all the other words combined. Thea clicked to the next page. Ivermont will not assume personal debts unrelated to plant operations. It will not absorb questionable executive expenses. It will not retain the current chief executive officer. Rook stared at her. The room seemed to shrink around that sentence. Soren Thorne's procurement authority is terminated effective immediately, Thea continued. Maren Voss's consulting agreement is suspended and frozen pending review. Informal family access to Thornlock's operating accounts, vendor approvals, and executive offices is revoked. Brissa's face hardened. Informal family access, I am his mother. Ansel answered without looking impressed. You hold no official role. Brissa opened her mouth, then closed it. For years, she had moved through Thornlock like it was a family estate. She had ordered staff, influenced hires, and treated workers as if they existed beneath the Thorn name. Now one sentence had turned her into a visitor. Soren pointed at the screen. You can't pin procurement on me. Calyx turned a folder toward him. Your signatures are on the approvals. Soren looked at Rook. Tell them you approved it. Rook glared back. Shut up. The family that had laughed together over broken glass was now breaking in public. Maren stepped away from Rook by half a foot. It was a small movement, but Vader saw it. So did Rook. Maren lifted her chin. I need to be clear, I was only a consultant. Calyx opened another file. Then these emails will help clarify your work. The screen changed. Messages appeared between Maren and Rook. In them, Maren suggested labeling personal image expenses as business development. She recommended delaying public mention of payroll problems until after the acquisition. She even wrote that Vader should be described as emotionally unstable if she challenged the divorce later. Maren's face went still. Rook looked at her sharply. You wrote that. Maren whispered, you agreed. Vader did not insult her. She did not call her names. She only looked at the invoices on the screen, then at Maren. Every invoice has a memory, Vader said. Maren looked away first. Rook slammed his palm on the table again. Enough, I built Thornlock from nothing. The sentence filled the room like an old lie, trying to survive one more time. Vader slid the first machine lease toward him. Not from nothing. Rook stared at the document, but did not pick it up. Read it, Vader said. He took it with angry hands. His eyes moved down the page. He found the funding source at the bottom. Ivor Family Bridge Fund. His mouth tightened. What is this? The first machine you brag about buying alone, Vader said. It was secured with money from my mother's family fund. Rook looked at her like she had spoken in another language. Vader's voice stayed calm, but her eyes had softened with an old sadness. You came home the night the bank rejected you. You said nobody believed in men like you. I used the money my mother left to protect me, and I let you believe an investor had stepped in. The room went silent. I thought your confidence was worth protecting, she said, so I protected it, and you used that confidence to build a story where I was only standing nearby. Rook's face changed. Not fully. Pride still fought in him. But beneath it, something old and ashamed flickered. Maren stared at him with open disappointment. The powerful man she had chosen had not built his legend alone. Brissa looked as if someone had pulled the floor from under the family name. Soren stopped moving entirely. Rook lowered the paper. You should have told me. Vader almost smiled, but there was no joy in it. You could not even survive my opinion. How would you have survived my help? For the first time, he had no answer. The room slowed. Vader looked down at the broken wedding photo. She remembered the young man in it, the man who once cried because someone believed in him. She had loved that man. She had cooked for him, worked beside him, covered for him, defended him, and used her mother's safety net to catch his dream before it hit the ground. She had not wanted to defeat him. She had wanted him to become worthy of all that faith. Rook seemed to sense that softness and reached for it. His voice dropped. "Vader, we can fix this. You loved me before all of them." The old tone almost worked. It found the part of her that still remembered his hands shaking over the bank letter. It found the part of her that had once believed sacrifice could teach a person gratitude. Then her eyes moved to the cracked photo. She saw herself kneeling on Brissa's floor while Marin watched and Soren laughed. "I loved you before you believed cruelty made you powerful," she said. Rook stepped closer. "Don't do this." "I am not doing this to you," Vader said. "I am stopping you from doing it to everyone else." Thea cleared her throat and returned to the screen. "The restructuring begins immediately. Ivermont will appoint interim operational oversight today. Worker payroll review begins within 24 hours. Safety repairs will be prioritized before expanded production resumes." Tavin exhaled quietly. For him, and for every worker waiting outside the glass doors of uncertainty, this was not revenge. It was oxygen. Rook bent down and grabbed his fallen chair, but instead of setting it upright, he shoved it backward. "You can't take my name off my building," he said. Vader looked at him across the table that now belonged to the truth. "You took my name off the story first." No one spoke after that. Outside the boardroom, footsteps gathered near the hall as Ivermont's transition team arrived with sealed boxes, new access badges, and the first paperwork that did not need Rook's permission. Rook's company credit card was declined in front of Marin. The sound was small. Just one short beep from the payment terminal at the hotel restaurant. But to Rook, it sounded louder than the boardroom door closing behind him. He stood at the counter with his jaw tight, one hand still holding the black card he had once used like proof of power. The cashier looked uncomfortable. Marin looked embarrassed. Rook tried another card. Declined. Then another. Declined. Marin stepped back as if failure could spread by standing too close. "This is a mistake," Rook said. But it was not a mistake. Within 2 weeks of the acquisition, Ivermont Dominion had frozen Thornlock's executive accounts, suspended questionable payments, and locked Rook out of every system he once controlled. His office badge no longer worked. His company vehicle had been recalled. His personal guarantees on old loans had come due. Even his divorce attorney had warned him that the public humiliation, the affair, and the financial deception had weakened his position. The man who had planned to erase Vader was now being erased from Thornlock, one access code at a time. At the plant, the change was quieter but deeper. Workers gathered near the payroll office, not cheering, not shouting, just standing in tired silence as the first delayed wages were corrected. Tavin held his pay confirmation in both hands, staring at it like he did not fully trust the number yet. Eldon Price, 57, the owner of a small parts supply company that had served Thornlock for years and was owed months of unpaid invoices, stood beside 2 other suppliers near the reception desk. He looked toward the factory floor and shook his head. "Rook told us the money was coming," Eldon said. "He never said it had already been spent." Tavin looked across the floor where new safety crews were checking Machine 9. "Vader saved this place," he said. One worker asked, "Not Rook?" Tavin's face hardened. "Rook saved his image. Vader saved our jobs." No one clapped. The silence was heavier than applause. It was the sound of people understanding who had really stood between them and ruin. In a temporary office upstairs, Vader sat across from Ansel and Calix as they reviewed the next set of findings. She wore no expression of victory. There was no joy in watching destruction spread, even when people had earned the consequences. Calix placed another file on the desk. "Soren's vendor approvals are worse than we thought," he said. "Several invoices were inflated, some parts were never delivered. His signatures are on the approvals." Vader looked through the pages. Soren's name appeared again and again, neat and confident, as if signing false documents had once felt safe because his brother owned the building. "What happens to him?" she asked. "Civil recovery first," Ansel said. "Possibly more, depending on what the authorities decide after review." Vader closed the file. Soren had laughed when Rook threw the broken frame at her feet. Now every laugh had a paper trail. Across town, Soren was already trying to save himself. He stood in Rook's living room, shouting while Brissa sat rigidly on the couch. "You told me everyone did this," Soren snapped. "You said procurement padding was normal before a buyout." Rook's face was pale with anger. "I told you to keep records clean. You approved the vendors. You signed them." Brissa looked between her sons, and for the first time, her voice was not commanding. It was frightened. "Stop blaming each other," she said. "We need Vader to show mercy." Rook laughed bitterly. "You think she will?" Brissa lifted her chin, trying to recover the old coldness. She was family. Soren stared at her. "You let Marin call her scaffolding." Brissa looked away. The word had come from Marin, but the room had belonged to Brissa. That was the part no one could deny. Marin's fall came faster because her career depended on image. Ivermont issued formal notices reviewing her consulting invoices. 2 clients cancelled contracts within a day. A third asked whether she had advised them to hide personal expenses as business development. Her name began moving through private business circles, not loudly, but sharply enough to cut. She went to Rook's temporary office space, furious and shaking. "You told me she was nobody," Marin said. Rook looked up from a stack of legal letters. For once, he looked older than his age. "I thought she was." The sentence hung between them. It destroyed Marin's last excuse and Rook's last lie at the same time. Marin stared at him like she finally saw the real size of the man she had chosen. Not the owner. Not the future. Just a proud man who had mistaken a quiet wife for an empty one. "I left my name on your invoices," she whispered. "You wrote them. You promised me protection." Rook gave a cold laugh. "I can't even protect myself." That was when Marin picked up her purse and walked out. She did not slam the door. She simply left because she had wanted the powerful man, not the ruined one. Later that day, Brissa came to see Vader at the temporary Ivermont office. She entered without the old confidence, though she still tried to wear it on her face. Vader did not rise. Brissa looked around the office, at the files, the new access badges, and the temporary sign with Vader's name on it. "This has gone far enough," Brissa said. Vader folded her hands. "Has it? Rook is your husband." He remembered that too late. "Soren is family. You remembered family only after cruelty stopped paying." Brissa's lips parted, but no words came. Vader's voice stayed low. "You watched him break our wedding photo. You watched him throw it at my feet. You let Marin sit beside him in my chair. Do not come here asking me to protect the family name you used as a weapon." Brissa looked smaller then. "Not sorry. Just powerless." After she left, Neva arrived with her signed witness statement. She had written everything clearly. Marin was present. Brissa encouraged Rook. Soren laughed. Rook told Vader to pick up the broken frame. Vader read only the first page before setting it down. Thank you, she said. Neva nodded. I should have helped you sooner. You did now. That was enough. By evening, workers began removing the old executive nameplate from Rook's office door. It had once read, Rook Thorne, Chief Executive Officer. Rook stood outside the plant gates, watching through the fence. No one had invited him inside. No one needed him to approve the change. The nameplate came down with 2 screws and 1 quiet pull. Then a temporary sign went up. Ivermont Thornlock Restructuring Office, Vader Ivor Thorne, Controlling Trustee. Rook stared at it. For the first time, he understood that Vader had not only survived him. She had replaced him where it mattered most. And inside the office that used to be his, someone placed the broken wedding photo on the desk, still sealed, still waiting for the final room it would enter. 6 weeks after the acquisition closed, the old Thornlock sign came down just after sunrise. For a moment, every worker on the factory floor stopped moving. The metal letters that had once spelled Thornlock Manufacturing hung from the crane straps, scratched, faded, and heavier than they looked. Years of smoke, rain, pride, and broken promises clung to them. When the final bolt snapped free, the sign swung once in the air, and a low sound moved through the watching crowd. Not a cheer. Not a celebration. A release. Vader stood near the main entrance in a dark coat, watching as the new sign was lifted into place. Ivermont Forge and Fabrication. The letters caught the morning light. The plant was alive. Not perfect. Not healed in one clean miracle. But alive. Machine 9 had new safety guards. The leaking roof had been repaired. Warning tape was gone from the main aisle. Workers wore fresh badges. Suppliers had begun delivering again. The payroll office no longer felt like a place where people whispered bad news. The old fear in the building had not vanished completely. But it no longer ruled the air. Tavin stood beside Vader, holding a production report in one hand. First full run finished ahead of schedule, he said. Vader looked through the glass wall toward the floor. Men and women who had once waited for delayed wages were now working under bright lights, on machines that no longer sounded like they were begging to stop. Any safety holds? She asked. None. Any peril issues? Tavin almost smiled. Not anymore. That answer settled somewhere deep in her chest. For years, Vader had measured Thornlock by what was almost falling apart. Which worker was almost unpaid? Which machine was almost dangerous? Which bill was almost late enough to shut something down? Now she was learning to measure it by what had been saved. Neva entered from the administration hallway carrying a stack of worker files. She no longer wore the plain black uniform from Brissa's house. She now worked in the plant office, where her careful memory and steady manner made her better at handling people than half the executives Rook used to impress. These are the emergency fund applications, Neva said, and the scholarship forms are ready. Vader took the files. The emergency fund bore Lenora Ivor's name. The training scholarship bore Aldrin Ivor's name. Her mother's money had once rescued one man's dream in secret. Now it would rescue workers openly. Her uncle's company had once watched from a distance. Now it would train people who had been ignored by the family that claimed to own everything. Vader walked into her office. It was not large. She had refused the old oversized executive suite Rook once used like a throne. Her office had a clear view of the floor, a simple desk, and 2 framed items placed side by side. One was the original first machine lease. At the bottom, the funding source still read, Ivor Family Bridge Fund. The second frame held the broken wedding photo. She had not repaired it. The crack still crossed her younger face. The torn line still showed where the glass had split the picture. Rook's younger smile still looked untouched, almost innocent, almost impossible to connect to the man he became. Vader kept it that way because she no longer needed to pretend the marriage had been whole. Ansel stood near the door with a final folder in his hand. "The restructuring approval is ready," he said. Vader took the pen. For a second, she looked at the broken photo. The young woman in that picture had believed love meant standing beside someone, no matter how heavy he became. The woman holding the pen now understood something different. Love did not require her to kneel forever. She signed. The plant outside the window kept moving. That afternoon, Rook came to the gate. He looked thinner, not physically, but somehow reduced. His suit was expensive, but it no longer made him look powerful. It made him look like a man dressed for a version of his life that no longer existed. Noel stood at the security booth and did not open the gate. "I need to speak with my wife," Rook said. Noel looked at him carefully. "Mrs. Thorne is in a meeting." Rook's mouth tightened at the respect in Noel's voice. "Mrs. Thorne. Not Vader. Not your wife. Not the woman he could summon. Mrs. Thorne." Rook waited near the fence until Vader came out. She did not come alone. Ansel stood a few steps behind her, not as protection from danger, but as protection from confusion. Rook had used private conversations to twist truth for too long. There would be no more unwitnessed rooms. Vader stopped on the other side of the gate. Rook looked at her for a long moment. "I saw the sign," he said. "I know. You changed the name. I changed the ownership." He swallowed. "That place was my life." Vader looked past him to the building behind her. "No, it was many people's lives. You just spoke the loudest." The words struck him, but he did not explode. Maybe he was too tired. Maybe the loss had finally taught him what shouting could not recover. "I was wrong," he said. Vader studied him. There had been a time when those words would have entered her like medicine, a time when she would have held them carefully and built hope around them, but Rook's apology stood beside too many facts now. The smashed photo, the moved chair, the mistress in her seat, the hidden transfer plan, the payroll delays, the workers he risked, the family that laughed. Wrong was too small a word for all of that. "Yes," Vader said, "you were." Rook looked at the ground. "I didn't know about the money." "You were not supposed to know. It was given to save you, not own you." He looked up then why does it feel like it owns everything now? Vader's voice stayed quiet. "Because you built your pride on help you would have mocked if it came with my name attached." Rook's jaw tightened, but the old anger did not fully return. "What happens to me?" he asked. "That depends on what the investigators find, what your creditors decide, and what the court accepts." "And us?" Vader looked at the ringless hand at her side. "There is no us left for you to manage." The sentence was gentle. That made it final. Rook looked through the fence toward the plant floor. Workers moved under the new lights. Tavin crossed the aisle with a clipboard. Neva spoke with a young clerk near the office door. Noel stood steady at the booth. The place had not died without him. That seemed to hurt him more than anything Vader could have said. "I thought you needed me," he whispered. Vader looked at him through the metal bars. "I did," she said, "until needing you became the most dangerous thing about me." Rook's eyes moved to her office window. He could see the two frames on her desk from where he stood. The machine lease. The broken wedding photo. His hand began to shake again. Not because he feared money. Not because he feared the board. Because he finally understood the order of things. She had helped him build. He had tried to erase her. And she had carried the proof back into every room where he thought she did not belong. Vader turned to leave. Rook said her name once. Not sharply. Not like a command. Like a man calling after a door that had already closed. She did not turn back. Inside the plant, the first full shipment under Ivermont Forge and Fabrication rolled toward the loading bay. The workers watched it move, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. The plant had survived. The workers had survived. Vader had survived. And the photo Rook smashed to erase her now sat framed in her office, not as a wound, but as evidence. Evidence that silence is not weakness. Evidence that loyalty does not mean surrender. Evidence that a woman can pick up broken pieces and carry them into the room where the truth finally has a seat. That evening, Vader stood alone in her office after everyone had gone. The factory floor below was quiet. Machine 9 rested under new safety lights. The roof did not leak. The air smelled faintly of clean metal and fresh paint. Vader opened Aldrin's letter one last time. You used family wealth to build a man who later called you poor in spirit. That was his blindness, not your shame. She folded the letter and placed it beside her mother's old fund records. Then she looked at the broken wedding photo. For years, Rook had been untouched in that picture, while the crack ran through her face. Now she saw it differently. The crack was not where she ended. It was where the lie opened. Vader turned off the office light and stepped into the hallway. Behind her, the two frames remained on the desk. The lease that proved she had built. The photo that proved he had broken. Together, they told the truth Rook never wanted anyone to see. He had smashed the photo to erase her. But she carried it back as proof. Dear viewers, if this story reminded you that quiet people can still carry powerful truth, subscribe for more stories like this. Comment, Vader stood up, if you believe loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness.